Thank you. Hello, thank you for dealing with my fine my I was about to say financial difficulties. I meant technical difficulties. But we can see where my mind is at clearly. Okay. And in the process, I think I've messed up my You know what? It's fine. Okay. Hello. Welcome. Okay. Hello, hello. I am here now, ready to read. Hello. It is a Thursday night. Happy Thursday. Um, I hope everyone's doing well. And today we're going to do what we always do recently, which is continue reading Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I just went into the spark notes of this to give myself a little bit of a recap before we jump in. And I know that what we're dealing with at this point is the fact that Mr. Collins and Charlotte Lucas are betrothed, and Mrs. Bennet is very desperate for her daughters to get married, but all of the prospects are pretty weak right now. And we are jumping into volume 2 today, but I wanted to just quickly read the last few bits of the last chapter of volume 1. So it's some dialogue between Mr. Bennet and Mrs. Bennet. Um, okay. It ends with Mrs. Bennet saying, "I cannot bear to think that they should have all this estate. If it was not for the entail, I should not mind it." "What should you not mind?" "I should not mind anything at all. Let us be thankful that you are preserved from a state of such insensibility." "I can never be thankful, Mrs. Bennet, Mr. Bennet, for anything about the entail. How anyone could have the conscience to entail away an estate from one's own daughters, I cannot understand. And all for the sake of Mr. Collins, too. Why should he have more than anybody else?" "I leave it to yourself to determine," said Mr. Bennet. All right. Volume 2, Chapter 1. Miss Bingley's letter arrived and put an end to doubt. The very first sentence conveyed the assurance of their being all settled in London for the winter, and concluded that her brother's regret at not having his time to pay his respects to his friends in Hertfordshire before he left the country. Hope was over, entirely over, and when Jane could attend to the rest of the letter, she found little, except for the professed affection of the writer, that could give her any comfort. Miss Darcy's praise occupied the chief of it. Her many attractions were again dwelt on, and Caroline boasted joyfully of their increasing intimacy, and ventured to predict the accomplishment of the wishes that had been unfolded in her former letter. She wrote also with great pleasure of her brother's being intimate of Mr. Darcy's house, and mentioned with raptures some plans of the latter with regard to new furniture. Elizabeth, to whom Jane was very soon communicated the chief of all this, heard it in silent indignation. Her heart was divided between concern for her sister and resentment against all the others. To Caroline's assertion of her brother's being partial to Miss Darcy, She paid no credit. That was really fond of Jane. She doubted no more than had ever done, and much as she had always been disposed to like him, she could not think without anger, hardly any contempt, on the easiness of temper, that want of proper resolution which now made him the slave of his designing friends, and led him to sacrifice his own happiness to the caprice of their inclinations. Had his own happiness, however, been the only sacrifice, he might have allowed to sport with it in whatever manner he thought best. But her sister's was involved in it, and she thought he must be sensible himself. It was a subject, in short, on which reflection could be long indulged, and must be unavailing. She could think of nothing else. And yet whether Bingley's regard had really died away, or was suppressed by his friend's interference, whether he had been aware of Jane's attachment, or whether it had escaped his observation, whichever being the case, though her opinion of him must be materially affected by the difference, her sister's situation remained the same, her peace equally wounded. A day or two passed before Jane had courage to speak of her feelings to Elizabeth, but at last, on Mrs. Bennet's leaving them together, after a longer irritation than usual about Netherfield and its master, she could not help saying, "Oh, that my dear mother had more command over herself! She can have no idea of the pain she gives me by her continual reflections on him. But I will not repine. It cannot last long. He will be forgot, and we shall all be as we were before." Elizabeth looked at her sister with incredulous solicitude, but said nothing. "You doubt me," cried Jane, slightly coloring. "Indeed, you have no reason. He may live in my memory as the most suitable, amiable man of my acquaintance, but that is all." Hello? Oh, that's unfortunate. When did I lose my mic? I don't know. Damn it. I'm gonna figure this out for a second. I don't know when I lost it. I'm glad I noticed. I'm just gonna start a few paragraphs behind. Okay. Hello, hello. A day or two passed before Jane had courage to speak of her feelings to Elizabeth. But at last, on Mrs. Bennet's leaving them together, after a long irritation than usual about Netherfield and its master, she could not help saying, "Oh, that my dear mother had more command over herself! She can have no idea of the pain she gives me by her continual reflections of him. But I will not repine. It cannot last long. He will be forgot, and we shall all be as we were before." Elizabeth looked at her sister with incredulous solicitude, but said nothing. "You doubt me," cried Jane, slightly coloring. "Indeed, you have no reason. He may live in my memory as the most amiable man of my acquaintance, but that is all. I have nothing either to hope or fear, and nothing to reproach him with. Thank God, I have not that pain. A little time, therefore, I shall certainly try to get the better." With a stronger voice, she soon added, "I have this comfort immediately, that it has not been more than an error of fancy on my side, and that it has done no harm to any one but myself." "My dear Jane," exclaimed Elizabeth, "you are too good. Your sweetness and disinterestedness are really angelic, but I do not know what to say to you. I feel as I have never done you justice, or loved you as you deserve." Miss Bennet eagerly disclaimed all extraordinary merit, and threw back on praise of her sister's warm affection. "Nay," said Elizabeth, "this is not fair. You wish to think all the world respectable, and are hurt if I speak ill of anybody. I only want to think of you as perfect, and you set yourself against it. Do not be afraid of my running into any excess, of my encroaching on your privilege of universal goodwill. You need not. There are few people whom I really love, and still fewer of whom I think well. The more I see of the world, the more I am dissatisfied with it, and every day confirms my belief of the inconsistency of all human characters, and of the little dependence that can be placed on the appearance of either merits or sense. I have met with two instances lately. One I will not mention, and the other is Charlotte's marriage. It is unaccountable. In every view, it is unaccountable. My dear Lizzie, do not give way to such feelings as these. They will ruin your happiness. You do not make allowance enough for difference of situation and temper. Consider Mr. Collins' respectability, and Charlotte's prudent, steady character. Remember that she is one of a large family, that as to fortune, it is a most eligible match, and be ready to believe, for everybody's sake, that she may feel something like regard and esteem for our cousin. To oblige you, I would try to believe almost anything, but no one else could be benefited by such a belief as this. For were I persuaded that Charlotte had any regard for him, I should only think worse for her understanding than I do now of my heart. My dear Jane, Mr. Collins is a conceited, pompous, narrow-minded, silly man. You know he is, as well as I do, and you must feel, as well as I do, that the woman who marries him cannot have a proper way of thinking. You shall not defend her, though it is Charlotte Lucas. You shall not, for the sake of one individual, change the meanings of principle and integrity, nor endeavor to persuade yourself or me that selfishness is prudence, and insensibility of danger security for happiness. I must not think your language too strong in speaking of both, replied Jane, and I hope you will be convinced of it by seeing them happy together. But enough of this. You alluded to something else. You mentioned two instances. I cannot misunderstand you, but I entreat you, dear Lizzie, not to pain me by thinking that person to blame and saying your opinion of him is sunk. You must not be so ready to fancy ourselves intentionally injured. We must not expect a lively young man to be always so guarded and circumspect. It is very often nothing but our own vanity that deceives us. Women fancy admiration means more than it does. And men take care that they should. And if designedly done, they cannot be justified, but I have no idea of there being much design in a world as some persons imagine. I am far from attributing any part of Mr. Bingley's conduct to design, said Elizabeth, but without scheming to do wrong or to make others unhappy, there may be error and there may be misery. Thoughtlessness, want of attention to other people's feelings, and want of resolution will do the business. And do you impute it to either of those? Yes, to the last. But if I go on, I shall displease you by saying what I think of persons you esteem. Stop me whilst you can. You persist, then, in supposing his sisters influence him? Yes, in conjunction with his friend. I cannot believe it. Why should they try to influence him? They can only wish his happiness. If he is attached to me, no other woman can secure it. Your first position is false. They may wish many things besides his happiness. They may wish his increase of wealth and consequence, that may wish him to marry a girl who has the importance of money, great connections, and pride. Beyond a doubt, they do wish him to choose Miss Darcy, replied Jane. But this may be from better feelings than you are supposing. They have known her much longer than they have known me. No wonder if they're happy, if they love her better. But whatever may be their own wishes, it is unlikely that they should have opposed their brothers. What sister would think herself at liberty to do it unless there was something very objectionable? If they believed him attracted to me, they would not try to part us. And even they, and if he were so, they would succeed. By supposing such an affection, you make everybody acting unnaturally and wrong, and me most unhappy. Do not distress me by the idea. I am not ashamed of having been mistaken, or at least it is slight. It is nothing in comparison of what I should feel in thinking ill of him or his sisters. Let me take it in the best light, in the light in which it may be understood. Elizabeth could not oppose such a wish, and from time to time Mr. Bingley's name was scarcely ever mentioned between them. Mrs. Bennet still continued to wonder and repine at his returning no more, and though a day seldom passed in which Elizabeth did not account for it clearly, there seemed little chance of her ever considering it with less perplexity. Her daughter endeavoured to convince her of what she did not believe herself, and his attentions to Jane had been merely the effect of a common and transient liking, which ceased when she saw her no more, but through the probability of the statement that, admitted at the time, she had the same story to repeat every day. Mrs. Bennet's best comfort was that Mr. Bingley must be down again in the summer. Mr. Bennet treated the matter differently. So, Lizzie, he says one day, your sister is crossed in love, I find. I congratulate her. Next to being married, a girl likes to be crossed in love a little now and then. It is something to think of, and gives her a sort of distraction among her companions. When is it your turn to come? You will hardly bear to, long outdone by Jane. Now is your time. Here are officers enough at Meryton to disappoint all the young ladies in the country. Let Wickham be your man. He is a pleasant fellow, and would jilt you creditably. Thank you, sir, but a less agreeable man would satisfy me. We must not all expect Jane's good fortune. True, said Mr. Bennet, but he is a comfort to think that Whatever of that kind may befall you, you have an affectionate mother who will always make the most of it. Mr. Wickham's society was of material service in dis- dispelling the gloom which of late perverse occurrences had thrown on many of the Longbourn family. They saw him often, and to his other recommendations was now added that of general unreserve. The whole of what Elizabeth had already heard, his claims on Mr. Darcy, and all that succeeded from him, was now openly acknowledged and publicly canvassed, and everybody was pleased to think how much they had always disliked Mr. Darcy before they had known anything of the matter. Miss Bennet was the only creature who could suppose that there may be any extenuating circumstances in the case. Unknown to the society of Hertfordshire, her mild and steady candour always pleased for allowances, and urged the possibility of mistakes, but by everybody else Mr. Darcy was condemned as the worst of men. Okay, that was chapter 1. Okay. And let's just jump into chapter 2, shall we? After a yawn and after a sip of tea. Okay. After a week spent in professions of love and schemes of felicity, Mr. Collins was called from his amiable Charlotte by the arrival of Saturday. The pain of separation, however, may be alleviated on his side by preparations for the reception of his bride, as he had reason to hope that shortly after his next return to Hertfordshire, the day would be fixed was to make him the happiest of men. He took leave of his relations at Longbourn with as much solemnity as before, wished his fair cousins health and happiness again, and promised their father another letter of thanks. On the following Monday, Mrs. Bennet had the pleasure of receiving her brother and his wife, who came as usual to spend the Christmas at Longbourn. Mr. Gardinier was a sensible, gentlemanlike man, greatly superior to his sister, as well as by nature as education. The Netherfield ladies would have difficulty in believing that a man who lived by trade, and within view of his own warehouses, could have been so well bred and agreeable. Mrs. Gardinier, who was several years younger than Mrs. Bennet and Mrs. Phillips, was an amiable, intelligent, elegant woman, and a great favourite of all Longbourn nieces. Between the eldest and herself especially, there subsisted a very particular regard. They had frequently been staying with her in town. The first part of Mrs. Gardinier's business on her arrival was to dispute her presence and describe the newest fashions. When this was all done, she had a less active part to play. It became her turn to listen. Miss Bennet had many grievances to relate and much to complain of. They had all very ill used since the last time saw her sister. 2 of the girls had been to the point of marriage, and after all, there was nothing in it. I do not blame Jane, she continued, for Jane would have got Mr. Bingley, and if she could. But Lizzie? Oh, sister, it is very hard to think that she must not have been Mr. Collins' wife by this time, had it not been for her own perverseness. He made her an offer in this very room, and she refused him. The consequence of this, that Lady Lucas will have a daughter married before I have, and that Longbourn estate is just as much entailed as ever. The Lucases are very artful people, indeed, sister. They are all what they can get. I am sorry to say it to them. It makes me very nervous and poorly to be thwarted so in my own family and to have neighbors who think of themselves before anybody else. However, your coming just at this time is the greatest of comforts, and I am very glad to hear what you tell us of long sleeves. Mrs. Gardiner, who to whom the chief of this news had been given before in the course of Jane and Elizabeth's correspondence with her, made her sister a slight answer, and in compassion with her nieces, turned the conversation. When alone with Elizabeth afterward, she spoke more on the subject. "It seems likely to have been a desirable match for Jane," said she. "I am sorry it went off, but these things happen so often. A young man, such as you describe Mr. Bingley, so easily falls in love with a pretty girl for a few weeks, and then accident separates them, so easily forgets her, that these sort of inconsistencies are very frequent." "An excellent consolation in its way," said Elizabeth, "but it will not do for us. We do not suffer by accidents. It does not often happen that the interference of friends will persuade a young man of independent fortune to think of no more of a girl whom he was violently in love with only a few days before." But that expression of violently in love is so hackneyed, so doubtful, so indefinite that it gives me very little idea, as it is often applied to feelings which arise from a half hour's acquaintance as to a real strong attachment. Pray, how violent was Mr. Bingley's love? I never saw a more promising inclination. He was growing quite unattracted to other people and wholly engrossed by her. Every time they met, it was more decided and remarkable. At his own ball, he offered 2 or 3 young ladies by not asking them to dance, and I spoke to him twice myself without receiving an answer. Could there be finer symptoms? Is not general incivility the very essence of love? Oh, yes, of that kind of love which I suppose him to have felt. Poor Jane. I'm sorry for her, because with her disposition, she may not get over it immediately. It had better happen to you, Lizzie. You would have laughed yourself out of it sooner. But do you think she would have prevailed on to go back with us? Change of scene might be of advice, and perhaps a little relief from home may be useful as anything. Elizabeth was exceedingly pleased with this proposal and felt persuaded of her sister's ready um, acquiescence, acquiescence, acquiescence. I'm not sure. "I hope," added Mrs. Gardiner, "that no consideration with regard to this young man will influence her. We live in so different a part of town. All of our connections are so different, and as you well know, we go out so little." "That it is very improbable they should meet at all, unless he really comes to see her. And that is quite impossible, for he is now in the custody of his friend. And Mr. Darcy would no more suffer him to call on Jane in such a part of London. My dear aunt, how could you think of it? Mr. Darcy may perhaps have heard of such a place at Gracechurch Street, but he could hardly think a month's ablution enough to cleanse himself from its impurities. Were he once to enter it, and depend upon it, Mr. Bingley never stirs without him." "So much the better. I hope we will not meet at all. But does not Jane correspond with the sister? She will not be able to help calling. She will drop the acquaintance entirely. But in spite of the certainty in which Elizabeth affected to place this point, as well as the still more interesting one of Bingley's being withheld from seeing Jane, she felt a solicitude on the subject that convinced her, on examination, that she did not consider it entirely hopeless. It was possible, and sometimes she thought it probable, that his affection might be reanimated, the influence of his friend successfully combated by the more natural influence of Jane's attractions. Miss Bennet accepted her aunt's invitation with pleasure, and the Bingleys were no otherwise in her thoughts at that time than she had hoped that, by Caroline's not living in the same house with her brother, she might occasionally spend a morning with her without any danger of seeing him. The Gardiners stayed a week at Longbourn, and what with the Phillipses, the Lucases, and the officers, that was not a day without its engagement. Mrs. Bennet had so carefully provided for the entertainment for her brother and sister that they did not once come to sit down for family dinner. When the engagement was for home, some of the officers always made part of it, of which officers Mr. Wickham was sure to be one. And on these occasions, Mrs. Gardiner, rendering suspicious of Elizabeth's warm commendation of him, narrowly observed them both, without supposing them, from what she saw, to be very seriously in love. Their preference of each other was plain enough to make her a little uneasy, and she resolved to speak to Elizabeth on the subject before she left Hertfordshire, and represent to her the imprudence of encouraging such an attachment. To Mrs. Gardiner, Wickham had one means of affording pleasure, unconnected with his general powers. About 10 or a dozen years ago, before her marriage, she spent a considerable time in that very part of Derbyshire to which he belonged. They had, therefore, many acquaintance in common, and though Wickham had been little there since the death of Mr. Darcy's father 5 years before, it was yet in his power to give her fresher intelligence of her former friends that she had been in the way of procuring. Mrs. Gardiner had seen Pemberley and known the late Mr. Darcy by character perfectly well. Here, consequently, was an inexhaustible subject of discourse. In comparing her recollection of Pemberley and the minute description which Wickham could give, and in bestowing her tribute of praise on the character of its late professor, she was delighting both him and herself. On being made acquainted with the present Mr. Darcy's treatment of him, she tried to remember something of that gentleman's reputed disposition when quite a lad, which might agree with it, was confident at last, and she recollected having heard Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy formerly spoken of as a very proud, ill-natured boy. Okay, that was chapter 2. Okay, chapter 3 is about 3.5 pages. A similar length to chapter 2. How we all doing out there? I'm curious to see what's gonna come of this Mrs. Gardiner character, because she seems to be kind of like Mrs. Bennet in some ways. Yeah. Okay. All right. Shall we jump in? Oh, Quixote42. Thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. Oh my gosh. Oh, they're from Neff. Oh, that's so sweet. Ugh, I love Neff. Wow. Okay. Anyway, chapter 3. Mrs. Gardiner's caution to Elizabeth was punctually and kindly given to the first favorable opportunity of speaking to her alone. After honestly telling her what she thought, she thus went on. You are too sensible a girl, Lizzie, to fall in love merely because you wanted against it, and therefore I am not afraid of speaking openly. Seriously, I would have you be on guard. Do not involve yourself or endeavor to involve him in an affection which the want of fortune would make so very imprudent. I have nothing to say against him. He is a most interesting young man, and if he had the fortune he ought to have, I should think you could not do better. But as it is, you must not let your fancy run away with you. You have sense, and we all expect you to use it. Your father would depend on your resolution and good conduct, I am sure. You must not disappoint your father. My dear aunt, this is being serious. This is being serious indeed. Yes, and I hope to engage you to be serious likewise. Well then, you need not be under any alarm. I will take care of myself, and of Mr. Wickham too. He shall not be in love with me, if I can prevent it. Elizabeth, you are not serious now. I beg your pardon. I will try again. At present, I am not in love with Mr. Wickham. No, I certainly am not. But he is, beyond all comparison, a most agreeable man I have ever saw, and if he becomes really attached to me, I believe it will be better that he should not. I see the imprudence of it. Oh, that abominable Mr. Darcy! My father's opinion of me does me the greatest honor, and I should be miserable to forfeit it. My father, however, is partial to Mr. Wickham. In short, my dear aunt, I should be very sorry to be the means of making any of you unhappy. But since we see every day that where there is affection, young people are seldom withheld by immediate want of fortune from entering into engagements with each other, how can I promise to be wiser than many of my fellow creatures if I am tempted, or how I even know that it would be wisdom to resist? All that I can promise you, therefore, is not to be in a hurry. I will not be in a hurry to believe myself his first object. When I am in company with him, I will not be wishing. In short, I will do my best. Perhaps it will be as well if you discourage his coming here so very often. At least you should not remind your mother of inviting him. As I did the other day, said Elizabeth, with a conscious smile. Very true, it will be wise in me to refrain from that. But do not imagine that he is always here so often. It is on your account that he has been so frequently invited this week. You know my mother's ideas as to the necessity of constant company with her friends. But really, and upon my honor, I will try to do what I think to be wisest. And now, I hope you are satisfied. Her aunt assured her that she was. And Elizabeth, having thanked her for the kindness of her hints, they parted. A wonderful instance of advice being given on such a point without being resented. Mr. Collins returned to Hertfordshire soon after it had been quitted by the Gardiners and Jane, but as he took up his abode with the Lucases, his arrival was no great inconvenience to Mrs. Bennet. His marriage was now fast approaching, and she was at length so far resigned as to think it inevitable, and even repeatedly to say in an ill-natured tone that she wished they might be happy. Thursday was to be the wedding day, and on Wednesday Miss Lucas paid her farewell visit. And when she rose to take leave, Elizabeth, ashamed of her mother's ungracious and reluctant good wishes, sincerely affected her herself, accompanied her out of the room, and they went downstairs together. As they went downstairs together, Charlotte said, "I shall depend on hearing from you very often, Eliza." "That you certainly will. And I have another favor to ask. Will you come and see me? We shall often meet, I hope, in Hertfordshire. I am not likely to leave Kent for some time. Promise me, therefore, to come to Hunsford." Elizabeth could not refuse, though she foresaw little pleasure in the visit. "My father and Maria are to come visit me in March," added Charlotte, "and I hope you will consent to be of the party. Indeed, Eliza, you will be as welcome to me as either of them." The wedding took place. The bride and bridegroom sent off for Kent with from the church door, and everybody had as much to say or to hear on the subject as usual. Elizabeth soon heard from her friend, and their correspondence was regular and frequent as it had ever been, and it should be equally unreserved as impossible. Elizabeth could never address her without feeling that all the comfort of intimacy was over, and though determined not to slacken as a correspondent, it was for the sake of what had been rather than what was. Charlotte's first letters were received with a good deal of eagerness. There could not be curiosity to know how she would speak of her new home, how she would like Lady Catherine, and how happy she would to dare pronounce herself to be, though when the letters were read, Elizabeth felt that Charlotte expressed herself on every point exactly as she might have foreseen. She wrote cheerfully, seemed surrounded with comforts, and mentioned nothing which she could not praise. The house, furniture, neighborhood, and roads were all to her taste, and Lady Catherine's behavior was most friendly and obliging. It was Mr. Collins's picture of Hunsford and Rosings rationally softened, and Elizabeth perceived that she must wait for her own visit there to know the rest. Jane had already written a few times to her sister to announce their safe arrival in London, and when she wrote again, Elizabeth hoped it would be in her power to say something of the Bingleys. Her impatience for the second letter was as well rewarded as impatience generally is. Jane had been a week in town without either seeing or hearing from Caroline. She accounted for it, however, by supposing that her last letter to her friend from Longbourn had, by some accident, been lost. "My aunt," she continued, "is going tomorrow into that part of town, and I shall take the responsibility of calling in Grosvenor Street." She wrote again when the visit was paid, and she had seen Miss Bingley. "I did not think Caroline in spirits," were her words, "but she was very glad to see me, and reproached me for giving her no notice of my coming to London. I was right, therefore. My last letter had never reached her. I inquired after their brother, of course. He was well, but so much engaged with Mr. Darcy, and they scarcely ever saw him. I found that Miss Darcy was expected for dinner. I wish I could see her. My visit was not long, as Caroline and Mrs. Hurst were going out. I dare say I shall soon see them here." Elizabeth shook her head over this letter. It convinced her that accident only could discover to Mr. Bingley her sister's being in town. 4 weeks passed, and Jane saw nothing of him. She endeavored to persuade herself that she did not regret it, but she could no longer be blind to Miss Bingley's inattention. After waiting at home every morning for a fortnight and inventing every evening a fresh excuse for her, the visitor did at least appear for the shortness of her stay, and yet more, the alteration of her manner would allow Jane to deceive herself no longer. The letter which she wrote on this occasion to her sister will prove what she felt. My dearest Lizzie will, I am sure, be incapable of triumphing her own judgment as my expense. I'm trying to figure out what this letter is about. Okay, so it's from Jane. Um, being capable of triumphing in her own judgment at my expense, when I confess myself to have been entirely deceived by Miss Bingley's regard for me. But, my dear sister, though the event has proved you right, do not think me obstinate if I still assert that, considering what her behaviour was, my confidence was as natural as your suspicion. I do not at all comprehend her reason for wishing to be intimate with me, but if the same circumstances were to happen again, I am sure not to be deceived again. Caroline did not return my visit till yesterday, and not a note, not a line did I receive in the meantime. When she did not come, it was very evident that she had no pleasure in it. She made a slight formal apology for not calling before, and not a word of wishing to see me again, and was in every respect so altered a creature. And when she went away, I was perfectly resolved to continue the acquaintance no longer. I pity, though I cannot help blaming her. She was very wrong in singling me out as she did, I can safely say, that every advance to intimacy began on her side. But I pity her because she must feel that she has been acting wrong, and because I am very sure that anxiety for her brother is the cause of it. I need not explain myself further, and though we know these anxiety to be quite needless, yet if she feels it, it will easily account for her behavior to me, and so deservedly dear as he is to his sister. Whatever anxiety she may feel on his behalf is natural and amiable. I cannot but wonder, however, as her having such fears now, because if he had all cared about me, we must have met long, long ago. He knows of my being in town, I am certain, from something she said to herself, and yet it should seem to her manner I am talking as if she wanted to persuade herself that he is really partial to Miss Darcy. I cannot understand it. If I were not afraid of judging harshly, I should be almost tempted to say that there is a long appearance of duplicity in all this. But I will endeavor to banish all painful thought, and think only of what will make me happy. Your affection and the invariable kindness of my dear uncle and aunt. Let me hear from you very soon. Miss Bingley said something of his never returning to Netherfield again, and giving up the house, but not with any certainty. We had better not mention it. I am extremely glad that you have such pleasant accounts from our friends at Hunsford. Pray go and see them, with Sir William and Maria. I am sure you will be very comfortable there. Yours, Anne C. This letter gave Elizabeth some pain, but her spirits returned as she considered that Jane would no longer be duped, by the sister at least. All expectation from the brother was now absolutely over. She would not even wish for any renewal of his attentions. His character sunk on every review of it, and as a punishment for him, as well as a possible advance to Jane, she seriously hoped he might really soon marry Mr. Darcy's sister, as, by Wickham's account, she would not make him abundantly regret what he had thrown away. Mrs. Gardiner, what about this time reminded Elizabeth of her promise concerning that gentleman, and required information. And Elizabeth had such to send as might rather give contentment to her aunt than to herself. His apparent partiality had subsided, his attentions were over, and he was the admirer to someone else. Elizabeth was watchful enough to see it all, but she could not see it and write of it without material pain. Her heart had been but slightly touched, and her vanity was satisfied with believing that she would not have been would have been his only choice, had fortune permitted it. The sudden acquisition of £10,000 was the most remarkable charm for the young lady, to whom he was now rendering himself agreeable. But Elizabeth, less clear-sighted perhaps than his case than in Charlotte's, did not quarrel with him for his wish of independence. Nothing, on the contrary, could be more natural, and while able to suppose that it cost him only a few struggles to relinquish her, she was ready to allow it a wise and desirable measure for both, and could verily sincerely wish him happy. All this was acknowledged to Mr. Gardiner and to Mrs. Gardiner, and after relating the circumstance, she thus went on. I am now convinced, my dear aunt, that I have never been so much in love, for had I really experienced that pure and everlasting passion, I should at present detest his very name, and wish him all manner of evil. But my feelings are not only cordial toward him, they are ever imperial toward Miss King. I cannot find out that I hate her at all, or that I am the least unwilling to think her a very good sort of girl. There can be no love in all this. My watchfulness has been effectual, and though I should certainly be more interesting objects for all my acquaintance, where I distractedly in love with him, I cannot say my regret for comparative insignificance. Importance may sometimes be purchased too dearly. Kitty and Lydia take his defection much more to heart than I do. They are young in the ways of the world, and not yet open to the mortifying conviction that handsome young men must have something to live on, as well as the plain. Okay. I am going to take a very short break, and I will be back to read chapter 4 and 5. So I will see you in like 4 minutes. Okay. Hello, I'm back. I'm back from a brief pause. Okay, shall we continue? Okay, I'm curious about this Mrs. Gardner character. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Chapter 4. With no greater events than these in the Longbourn family, and otherwise diversified by little beyond the walks to Meryton, sometimes dirty and sometimes cold, did January and February pass away. March was to take Elizabeth to Hunsford. She had not at first thought very seriously of going thither, but Caroline, she soon found, was depending on the plan, and she gradually learned to consider it herself with great pleasure as well as great certainty. Absence had increased her desire for seeing Charlotte again, and weakened her disgust at Mr. Collins. There was novelty in the scheme, uh, and as with such a mother and such uncompanionable sisters, home could be faultless, and little change was not unwelcome for its own sake. The journey would, moreover, give her a peep at Jane, and in short, as the time drew near, she would have been sorry for any delay. Everything, however, went on smoothly, and was finally settled according to Caroline's first sketch. She was to accompany Sir William and his second daughter. The improvement of spending a night in London was added in time, and the plan became perfect as a plan could be. The only pain was in leaving her father, who would certainly miss her, and whom, when it came to the point, so little liked her going that he told her to write him and almost promised to answer the letter. The farewell between herself and Mr. Wickham was perfectly friendly, on his side even more. His present pursuit could make him forget that Elizabeth had been the first to excite him and deserve his attention, and first to listen and to pity, and first to be admired, and in his manner of bidding her adieu, wished her every enjoyment, reminding her of what she was to expect in Lady Catherine de Bow, and trusting their opinion of her, their opinion of everybody, would always coincide. There was a solicitude, an interest which she felt must ever attach her to him with the most sincere regard, and she parted from him convicted that whether married or single, he must always be the model of amiable and pleasing. Her fellow travelers the next day were not of a kind to make her think him less agreeable. Sir William Lucas and his daughter Maria, a good humored girl, but as empty headed as himself, had nothing to say that could be worth hearing, and were listened to him about so much delight as the rattle of the chaise. Elizabeth loved absurdities, but his presentation of knighthood and his civilities were worn out like his information. It was a journey of only 24 miles, and they began it so early as to be in Gracechurch Street by noon. As they drove to Mr. Gardner's door, Jane was at a drawing room window watching their arrival. When they entered the passage, she was there to welcome them, and Elizabeth, looking earnestly at her face, was pleased to see it as healthful and lovely as ever. On the stairs were a troop of little boys and girls whose eagerness for their cousin's appearance would not only allow them to wait in the drawing room, and those shyness, as they had not seen her for a 12-month, prevented their coming lower. All was joy and kindness. The day passed most pleasantly away, the morning in bustle and shopping, and the evening at one of the theatres. Elizabeth then contrived to sit by her aunt. Their first subject was her sister, and she was more grieved than astonished to hear, in reply to her minute inquiries, that though Jane always struggled to support her spirits, there were periods of dejection. It was reasonable, however, to hope that they would not continue long. Mrs. Gardiner gave her the particulars also of Miss Bingley's visit to Gracechurch Street, and repeated conversations occurring at different times between Jane and herself, which proved that the former had, from her heart, given up the acquaintance. Mrs. Gardiner then rallied her niece on Wickham's desertion, and complimented her on bearing it so well. "But, my dear Elizabeth," she added, "what sort of girl is Miss King? I should be sorry to hear of our friend Mercenary." "Pray, my dear aunt, what is the difference in matrimonial affairs between the mercenary and the prudent motive? Where does discretion end and avarice begin? Last Christmas you were afraid of him marrying me because it would be imprudent, and now, because he is trying to get a girl with only £10,000, you want to find out that he is mercenary? If you will only tell me what sort of a girl Miss King is, I shall know what to think. She is a very good kind of girl, I believe. I know no harm of her. But he paid her not the smallest attention till her grandmother's death made her the mistress of this fortune. No, why should he? If it was not allowable for him to gain my affections because I had no money, what occasion could there be for making love to a girl whom he did not care about and who was equally poor? But there seems indelicacy in directing his attentions toward her so soon after this event. A man in distressed circumstances has no time for all those elegant decorums which other people may observe. If she does not object to it, why should we? Her not objecting does not justify him. It only shows her being deficient in something herself, sense or feeling. "Well," cried Elizabeth, "have it as you choose. He shall be mercenary, and she shall be foolish." "No, Lizzie, that is what I do not choose. I should be sorry, you know, to think ill of a young man who has lived so long in Derbyshire." "Oh, if that is all, I have a very poor opinion of young men who live in Derbyshire, and their intimate friends who live in Hertfordshire are so much better. I am sick of them all. Thank heaven, I am going tomorrow where I shall find a man who has not one agreeable quality, who has neither manner nor sense to recommend him. Stupid men are the only ones worth knowing, after all. Take care, Lizzie. The speech savors strongly of disappointment." They were separated by the confusion of the play, and she had unexpected happiness of an invitation to accompany her uncle and aunt in a tour of pleasure which they proposed taking in the summer. "We have not quite determined how far it shall carry us," said Mrs. Gardiner, "but perhaps to the lakes." No scheme could have been more agreeable to Elizabeth, and her acceptance of the invitation was most ready and grateful. "My dear, dear aunt," she rapturously cried, "what delight, what felicity! You give me such fresh life and vigor. Adieu to disappointment and spleen. What are men to rocks and mountains? Oh, what hours of transport we shall spend! And when we do return, it shall not be like other travelers, without being able to give one accurate idea of everything. We will know where we have gone. We will recollect what we have seen. Lakes, mountains, and rivers shall not be jumbled together into one reeling about in relative simulation, jumbled together in our imaginations, nor, when we attempt to describe any particular scene, we will begin quarreling about its relative situation. Let our first effusions be less insupportable than those of the generality 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 of travelers. Tech, what is up? How you doing, Tech? Thank you for being here. I thought you were gonna catch me. I never stop falling through. Now I know better, never let me. Doing well. How am I today? I'm doing well as well. um, I woke up, I went for a run, I came home, I biked to work, and had a lovely day at work. And my coworker was staying late to make a cake for my other coworker's birthday. So I stayed late as well to help her bake the cake, which was really fun. I'm glad I got to hang out with her. And then I met up with my friends. And now I'm reading out loud. So, very full day. What was your day like today? Have another sip of my tea. Mm. Yeah. Well, while you let me know how your day was today, I'm going to continue reading. Okay. Never mind. Let's see. I finally finished the game I've been playing. The collectibles were making me tear out my hair. Hell yeah. I'm so glad that you finished it. Do you feel accomplished? Do you feel cool? Okay. Um, all right. Chapter 5. Every object in the next day's journey was new and interesting to Elizabeth, and her spirits were in a state of enjoyment, for she had seen her sister looking so well as to banish all fear for her health, and the prospect of her northern tour was a constant source of delight. When they left the highroad for the lane of Hunsford, every eye was in search for the parsonage, and every turning expected to bring it in view. The paling of Rosings Park was their boundary on one side. Elizabeth smiled at the recollection of all that she had heard of its inhabitants. At length the parsonage was discernible. The garden sloping to the road, the house standing on it, the green pales and the laurel hedge, everything declared that they were arriving. Mr. Collins and Charlotte appeared at the door, and the carriage stopped at the small gate, which led to a short gravel walk to the house amidst the nods and smiles of the whole party. It's kind of interesting because it says the carriage stopped at the small gate, but stopped is spelled S-T-O-P-T. Stopped, rather than E-D. I'm wondering if stopped, like if the ending in a T was like a more common thing back then instead of ED. I don't know. I've never seen that before. Yeah. Or I'm wondering if stopped, stopt, is a different word than stopped. I don't know. I've never seen that before. Um, yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'll look it up. Dictionary time? Stopped is an ar archaic spelling of the past tense, past participle stop. Yes. Yeah, you might encounter stopped in older text, literature, or certain specialized documents, such as the name of musical instrument stops. Yeah, it's an, okay, archaic. Stopped is an old-fashioned way of writing stopped. So interesting. Okay. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, Tech. We did the same thing at the same time. Hi. Feist, I believe. No, Pride and Prejudice is not this big of a book. But this is like an entire Jane Austen collection, and it has 5 books in it. It has Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, Emma, and Persuasion in it. Yes. Um, what are you saying in chat? Okay. Well, now we need Rebel Juana to draw T's on all the stop signs in the land. Fuck yeah, I will. I'll do it. I'll start putting T's. I think, yeah, STOPT. Um, Feist, I have a question. Is your username at all inspired by the music artist Feist? Um, because I freaking love Feist, and I saw her live one time, and her live concert rocked my whole world. Like, I already kind of liked her music, but then I saw her live and I was like, what the fuck? Like, she did some crazy shit. Like, like, she did this thing where there was this guy, she kind of like asked, she had her stage in like 2 parts. She had like a bit of a, like, thing in the middle of the audience that she stood on, like a little circular platform, and she was kind of doing like an acoustic set. And then she did this thing where she was like, is anyone in the audience here solo? And this one guy was like, I am. And so she was like, would you mind like filming me? And so he like gave her a phone, and he kind of like held it and at her, but then so like the what was on the phone screen was being projected behind her on this big like, okay, being projected behind her on this big like projector screen type of thing, which was really sick. And then it started doing these like really cool loopy things, like the projector of her singing, and it was just so sick. And then you kind of started to realize that this guy was clearly not like just some random guy, like he was clearly part of her like crew. And he like eventually went backstage and like went to this notebook, and he started like flipping through the notebook, and you could see the lyrics to the song that she was singing in the notebook, and it was like backstage at the venue I was at. And it was so crazy. And then, sorry, I'll stop ranting about Feist in a second, but during the show, like during that, she eventually like went off stage and was just singing with a microphone, just like kind of walking amongst the audience, and she had a green screen, like, hi. Um, she had this green screen, like she was kind of just carrying this like green blanket, you know what I mean? And you kind of realize that it's a green screen, and eventually she kind of just lays it on the floor of the venue and she just sits on it, and then all of a sudden on the screen where things are being projected, there are these like beautiful graphics going on, and she's just sitting on it, and it's just like crazy. um oh, the internet is out. Okay, bye tech. Thanks for being here. Much love, much love. Um, anyway, does your username have anything to do with Feist? Is my question. But and then she goes on stage and you think she's just solo, and then bam, the projector's like curtain thing falls to the ground and she has a full freaking rock band behind her. And I was like, what the fuck? I was fucking blown away. um yes, it does. I love her first album. Yay! Wife and I listen to it all the time. Also, it's just such a cool name. It is such a cool name. Feist, man. Feist is great. She has she has a great song, or well, this she's like featured on this really cool song called Catholic Country by Kings of Convenience. Um and it's crazy. Let me send like a YouTube music link, since I feel like that's are you familiar with this song? I feel like this song feels like snow falling. I'm putting it in chat. The Twitch app sucks. Let me connect back to it. There we go. I don't know if you were a Spotify person or or a YouTube music song. No, how? I don't know that one. Is it good? Do you love it? Sorry, you got me speaking about musicians. No, how? Feist. Ah, yeah, there it is. I haven't heard it yet, though. Such a cool album cover, though. I will definitely check that out. Didn't know about this one. Absolutely do. Okay, hell yeah. Cool. Anyway. Anyway, Feist, thank you for being here. I am going to continue. Okay. At length, the parsonage was discernible. The garden sloping to the road, the house standing on it, the green pales and the laurel hedge, everything declared that they were arriving. Mr. Carlins and Charlotte appeared at the door, and the carriage stopped, there we go, at the small gate which led to a short gravel walk to the house, amidst the nods and smiles of the whole party. In a moment, they were all out of the chaise, rejoicing at the sight of each other. Mrs. Collins welcomed her friend with the liveliest pleasure, and Elizabeth was more and more satisfied with coming, when she found herself so affectionately received. She saw instantly that her cousin's manners were not altered by this marriage. His formal civility was just what it had been, and he detained her for some minutes to the gate to hear and satisfy his enquiries with all the family. They were then, with no other delay than his pointing out the neatness of the entrance, taken to the house, and as soon as they were in the parlor, he welcomed them a second time with ostentatious formality to his humble abode, and punctually retreated all his wife's offers of refreshment. Elizabeth was prepared to see him in his glory, and she did not help fancying that in displaying the good proportion of the room, its aspect, and its furniture, he addressed himself particularly to her, as if wishing to make her feel what she had lost in refusing him. But though everything seemed neat and comfortable, she was not able to gratify him by any sigh of repentance, and rather looked with wonder at her friend, as she could not have been so cheerful an air with such companion. When Mr. Collins said anything of which his wife might reasonably be ashamed, which certainly was not unseldom, she involuntarily turned her eye on Charlotte. Once or twice she could discern a faint blush, but in general Charlotte wisely did not hear. After sitting long enough to admire every article of furniture in the room, from one sideboard to the fender, to give an account of the journey, and of all that had happened in London, Mr. Collins invited them to take a stroll in the garden, which was large and well laid out, and to the cultivation of which he attended himself. To work in his garden was one of the most respectable pleasures, and Elizabeth admired that the command of countenance with which Charlotte talked of the healthfulness of the exercise, and owned she encouraged it as much as possible. Here, leading the way through every walk and cross-walk, and scarcely allowing them an interval to utter the praises he asked for, every view was pointed out with a minuteness that left beauty entirely behind. He could number the fields in every direction, and could tell how many trees they were in the most distant clump. But of all the views which his garden, or which the country and the kitchen could boast, none were to be compared with the prospect of Rosings, afforded by an opening in the trees that bordered the park nearly opposite the front of the house. It was a handsome, modern building, well situated and rising ground. From his garden, Mr. Collins could have led them round his 2 meadows, and the ladies would not having shoes to encounter the remains in a white frost, turned back. And while Sir William accompanied him, Charlotte took her sister and friend over to the house, extremely well pleased, possibly, to have the opportunity of showing it without her husband's help. It was rather small, and well built and convenient, and everything was fitted up and arranged with a neatness and consistency of which Elizabeth gave Charlotte all the credit. When Mr. Collins could be forgotten, there was really a great air of comfort throughout, and by Charlotte's evident enjoyment of it, Charlotte supposed he must be often forgotten. She had already learnt. There it is again! Instead of learned, it's learned. That's so interesting. She had already learnt that Lady Catherine was still in the country. It was spoken of again while they were at dinner, when Mr. Collins, joining in, observed, "Yes, Miss Elizabeth, you will have the honour of seeing Lady Catherine de Bow in the ensuing Sunday at church, and I need not say you will be delighted with her. She is all affability and condescension. Condescension. And I doubt not but you will be honoured with some portion of her notice when service is over. I have scarcely any hesitation in saying that she will include you and my sister Maria in every invitation with which she honours us during your stay here. Her behaviour to my dear Charlotte is charming. We dine at Rosings twice every week, and are never allowed to walk home. Her ladyship's carriage is regularly ordered for us. I should say one of her ladyship's carriages, for she has several. Lady Catherine, I learned. Lady Catherine is a very respectable, sensible woman indeed, added Charlotte, and a most attentive neighbor. Very true, my dear, that is exactly what I say. She is a sort of woman whom one cannot regard with too much deference. The evening was spent chiefly in talking over Hertfordshire news and telling again what had already been written. And when it closed, Elizabeth, in the solitude of her chamber, had to meditate upon Charlotte's degree of contentment, to understand her address in guiding and composure in bearing with her husband, and to acknowledge that it was done very well. She had also to anticipate how her visit would pass and the quiet tenor of their usual employments. The vexations, interruptions of Mr. Collins, and the gaieties of their intercourse with Rosings. A lively imagination soon settled it all. About the middle of the next day, as she was in her room getting ready for a walk, a sudden noise below seemed to speak the whole house in confusion, and after listening a moment, she heard somebody running upstairs in a violent fury and calling loudly after her. She opened the door and met Maria in the landing place, who, breathless with agitation, cried out, "Oh, my dear Eliza, pray make haste and come into the dining room, for there is such a sight to be seen. I will not tell you what it is. Make haste and come down this moment." Elizabeth asked questions in vain. Maria would tell her nothing more, and down they ran into the dining room, which fronted the lane, in quest of this wonder. It was two ladies stopping in a low phaeton at the garden gate. "And is this all?" cried Elizabeth. "I expected at least that the pigs were got into the garden, and there was nothing but Lady Catherine and her daughter." "La, my dear," said Maria, quite shocked at mistake, "it is not Lady Catherine. The old lady is Mrs. Jenkinson, who lives with them. The other is Miss de Bow. Only look at her. She is quite a little creature. Who would have thought she could be so thin and small? She is abominably rude to keep Charlotte out of doors in this wind. Why does she not come in? Oh, Charlotte says she hardly ever does. It is the greatest of favors when Miss de Bow comes in." "I like her appearance," said Elizabeth, struck with other ideas. "She looks sickly and cross. Yes, she will do for him very well. She will make him a very proper wife." Roasted Elizabeth. Mr. Collins and Charlotte were both standing at the gate in conversation with the ladies, and Sir William, to Elizabeth's high diversion, was stationed in the doorway, in earnest contemplation of the greatness before him, and constantly bowing whenever Miss de Bow looked that way. At length there was nothing more to be said. The ladies drove on, and the others returned to the house. Mr. Collins no sooner saw the two girls than he had began to congratulate them on their good fortune, which Charlotte explained by letting them know that the whole party was asked to dine at Rosings the next day. Okay, that was chapter 5 of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, and with that, we have finished our section for today. Tech, thank you for being here. Feist, thank you for being here. Neff, thank you for being here. And when does Prejudice come in? So first there's Pride, and then there's Prejudice. And Prejudice comes in after Pride is done. And when is Pride ever over, really? Happy Pride. I don't know. Yes, and I will see you. I do these every Thursday. I do read alouds of a book, and right now it's Pride and Prejudice. But let's fucking go. Um and I also do read alouds of poetry and stuff on other days. Thank you for the follow, Feist. I appreciate it. And then I do productivity and like co-working streams on mornings that I can, and I will do those next week. Um, so I will be back very soon. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a lovely night. Bye.